to get up now. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore!
I don't want to abolish government. I simply want to reduce it to the size where I could drag it into the bathroom and drown in the bathtub.
You bet I cut the taxes at the top.
How dare you? How dare you? Go ahead, make my day.
The Rick Smith Show starts now.
Welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here. For some, Merry Christmas. Christmas has come early. And not for you working people or you poor people. In fact, no coal in your stocking either. None of that. Coal, too much. Cost too much. We have made coal great again. And look, it's too good for you. I mean, it's just mind-blowing to me. It's amazing to me that today our representatives, well, they have chosen to ram through the tax bill. Now, remember, and I keep going back to the Tea Party who was screaming, Obama rammed that Affordable Care Act down our throats. 320 plus days it took from beginning to end, in excess of 70 hearings, tons of public input, tons of testimony, almost an entire year. And I said then, it's the longest ramming down in history. This thing, what are we at? A couple of weeks? 3, maybe? No hearings, no public input, nothing. Just pure ideological, this is what it is, take it. Well, take it. Bend over and take it. That's basically what this is. And today on the floor, as I've been saying, look, they're ramming this through so fast. And it's almost like the Grinch when he came in and he stole the last can of Who Hash. I mean, just absolutely just remarkable to me at what they have done. Now, Democratic Senator Chris Murphy from Connecticut on the floor today saying, look, this is the basic idea in many of these children's stories that he's talking about is that Christmas, Hanukkah, the holidays that we celebrate today aren't about pageantry. They aren't about pomp and circumstance or the presents or material things. Chris Murphy said that it's really about celebrating each other. It's about understanding what's important to us and who's important to us. Now, then he goes on to read How the Grinch Stole Christmas, which a perfect poem for today as we are just days away from Christmas and what you've seen. And again, not surprising, the Republican opportunists who this is their moment. This is their time. They've said it over and over. This is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to really, stick it to working people. And they are. They are not missing this opportunity. Now, the one thing I can say about 2017 is that, look, it could have been worse. This could have been the first thing out of the bag. This could have been up and done and down months ago. And then a whole steamroller effect of all of the other bad stuff. And I was thinking about, the Tea Party, because I keep asking, where is the Tea Party? Where are all of those flag waving, don't, I'm taxed enough already? Where are the tea twizzlers? I have yet to find them. It's almost a Where's Waldo game. Because, I remember them screaming during the 2016 election how we were going to drain the swamp and repeal and replace, and we're going to build the wall, we're going to lock her up. We were going to hire the best people, and it's going to be great. We're going to make America great again. And yet, all we've gotten is, Donald Trump cut his own taxes. What we've gotten is the Trump kids, they just got wealthier by the fact that no estate tax. And you keep going back to this. You go, now, this is where I gloat for a moment, because I said last year this was going to happen. I said last year that none of the populist message that came out of the Trump campaign was ever going to see the light of day. That we weren't bringing back manufacturing. We weren't bringing back those good union jobs that supported a prosperous working class. That was never going to happen. What it was going to be was the greatest heist, a kleptocracy. Bank robbers from the era gone by would be envious at what these people are getting away with. And look, they did it to us again. And look, none of us like it. None of us are happy with this. The polling is atrocious. I don't know how much lower Trump's approval ratings can go. The last Quinnipiac poll has Trump's approval rating of in the tank. In fact, they asked a bunch of simple questions. Do you think he cares about you, average Americans? 62% said no. Do you think he's honest? 62% said no. Do you think he's got any decent leadership skills? 62% said no. Do you think he's level-headed? 70% said no. Do you think he shares your values? 65% said no. So again, I keep coming back to, and you could go through all of this and the policies that they've pursued, and the mass of a very divided nation is saying no. We don't like the direction the president's taken the country. We don't like what the Republicans are doing, yet they're doing it. And why? Because you voters don't matter. They look at you, the Republican base, as useful idiots. Because you're going to vote for them anyway. And they found that out in Alabama. You almost elected a pedophile. 21,000 votes. That was it. Wake up. And the hope is that this tax plan, this scheme, this scam, whatever you want to call it, that this is that thing that wakes people up and goes, wait a minute, this isn't what we voted for. We wanted to build the wall and repeal and replace and drain the swamp because we wanted to replace it with everybody getting health insurance. Now, nobody ever told us what that would look like, but we all would have health insurance. It would be good insurance, according to Donald Trump. Everybody. Yet this, they're gonna repeal the mandate, which means about 13 million more of us will be uninsured because it's going to become really unaffordable. And they're doing their damnedest to destroy all of that. And I keep coming back to just a bit of sanity. I mean, honestly, this isn't difficult. And look, this is the time of giving. And I get that. And I want to give. I just think it's ridiculous that we're giving and giving and giving till it hurts to the people who already have, more than they can ever spend. This tax break is going to go to people whose great-great-great-great-great-grandchildren will never have to work a day in their lives. And we're taking it from Granny, who is just trying to make it to tomorrow. I mean, it's really just amazing. So I guess the message out of this holiday season, the poor and working class, congratulations. Your present this year is a generous and extremely high tax rate. It's coming. And of course, more uninsured. A Republican win-win. So I guess, with the holiday season here, what will we be getting? Well, we'll be getting the gift of staggering income inequality. Thanks to what I've been saying is the worst, most regressive tax code change in my lifetime. We're going to be leaving our kids about $2.2 trillion when this is over. And you go, what do we get for it? What are we going to get for it? Because nobody buys anymore the trickle-down argument. Nobody buys the idea that if we give more money to the rich, eventually something's got to fall out of their pockets. We know that that doesn't happen. We know the insatiable appetite for more never ends. And it was just over the weekend. I was having breakfast with my uncle, who is a very well-to-do guy, and his gaggle of other really, really well-to-do folks. And the question of how much is enough came up. And the answer universally was, it's never enough. We can never have enough. It's always the pursuit of more. It's always the pursuit of that next dollar will be the one that puts me over the top, or the next one, or the next one. It's never enough. And the question is when do we in the working class say enough already? Because here's the reality, and let me let you in a little secret, and it's not hard to figure out. They may have all the money, but we've outprocreated them. There are more of us, and while we still can vote, while they've still allowed that loophole to exist, that we can go in and you exercise our right to term limits by voting these bums out, and every person who voted for this in the House today and every person in the Senate who is going to vote for it should be thrown out on their ear. It's that simple. Understand, 92 million working class families in this country are going to be paying more in taxes in 2027. We know that to be fact. So I'm telling you, next November, 92 million families better be looking at the polls going, you voted for it, I'm voting for somebody else. And every senior citizen who's going to see a cut next year because, guess what? There are automatic cuts to Medicaid in this. Next year, $25 billion and $400 billion over the next decade. That means you, Granny. So get the walker, get the cane, I don't know, but start banging on some doors and screaming. And oh, by the way, here's my favorite part. They still haven't reauthorized the Children's Health Insurance Program. And as Senator Merkley pointed out today, what we're giving to the 1% could fund the CHIP program for 915 years. Let me say that again. For what we're giving to the 1%, it could fund that Children's Health Insurance Program for 915 years. So to say, well, we're broke, ludicrous, ridiculous, outrageous. And the fact that, again, we were told, we're going to create jobs. This is a job killer. And we know that too. And what's frustrating to me is there's so much in this that is horrible and worse than horrible. We were told from the start it's going to be about helping the middle class. It's going to be about helping workers. It's going to help simplify the tax code. Does none of that. What it does is it ensures the Trump family, it ensures that I don't even know what Ivanka's kids' names are and don't even care, but they'll never work a day in their lives. And their kids will never work a day in their lives. And their kids will never have to work a day in their lives. And why? Because your kids aren't going to have health insurance. And Merry Christmas. What you get this holiday season is the gift of worry. If you're a parent, good luck, because you got the gift of worrying about if the kids are going to get sick or if they're going to fall off their bikes. Because, hey, one accident, one injury, one illness, bankruptcy, homelessness. But hey, we gave a little bit more to our favorite billionaires. Doesn't that make you happy? Does it make you proud to know that we're going to have the largest billionaire class in the history of civilization? Isn't that great? Question is are you angry? Are you ticked off? Are you ready to do something about it? That becomes the question. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, Daniel Marins is going to be here, reporter over at Huffington Post, was at the Capitol. Evidently, there was a die-in. A bunch of the ADAPT folks, and I love the folks the ADAPT folks. Here in Pennsylvania, when Corbett was slashing budgets, they were all over the Capitol. And as the one woman told me, if they're going to kill me, you're going to watch me die. I give these people absolute credit. We're gonna find out what happened at the Capitol with the die-in. Quick break, right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
90% of the wealth, 10% of the people own 90% of the wealth. Where do you fit in? Take a look at yourself. 10% of the people own 90% of the wealth.
Where smart policy and sound investment matters. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1945. That was the day that workers ended their 99-day strike against the Ford Motor Company in Windsor, Ontario. Just across the river from Detroit, workers from the UAW Local 200 fought and won a union shop and dues checkoff. They had to fight hard to get it. The plant was organized during World War II. Workers put off many demands to help with the war effort. After the war, Ford refused to agree to a new contract and laid off 1,500 workers. The workers voiced their rage and issued new demands. They wanted vacation and layoff pay, better grievance procedures, and medical benefits. They also wanted compensation for work on Sundays and holidays. When Ford refused to budge, 14,000 workers took to the picket line and went on strike. By October, they also shut down the powerhouse that brought light, heat, and power to the plant. Management complained machinery would be damaged if the power remained off. The Ontario Provincial Police and the Royal Canadian Mounted Police were called in to reopen the plant. When they arrived, they found a barricade of some 2,000 cars and trucks reinforcing the picket lines. Then, 8,000 workers from Amalgamated Local 195, which included Chrysler workers, walked out in sympathy. They joined the picket lines and stayed out for a month. The Women's Auxiliary organized to feed the strikers. They had financial support from unions, churches, and small businesses from across the country. Returning soldiers marched in solidarity rallies along with much of the community. Because of this strong showing of support, negotiations were jump-started and soon workers were ratifying a new contract. This victory allowed what is now Unifor 584 to win unprecedented gains for its members for more than 3 decades.
Ireland, because the chair has detected a disturbance in the gallery in contravention of the law and against the rules of the House. The Sergeant at Arms will identify the person or persons responsible and have them escorted from the House chamber. Come on, yeah, good workers, good news to you out there. All about the good old union that's going into
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, ricksmithshow.com. So, as you heard, kill the bill, don't kill us. And like I said in the last segment, I met a number of ADAPT folks here in Harrisburg where they said, look, at the end of the day, if you're going to defund programs that save our lives, that take care of us, the most vulnerable of the vulnerable, you're going to have to watch us die in public. And look, I give these folks credit because understand how difficult it is for them to get to the Capitol, to get into some of these buildings. Good on them for fighting and saying, enough is enough. But again, today you saw a bunch of arrests, another die-in, and that's why I've asked Daniel Marins to come talk with us. He's written a piece about today's protests. Daniel, thanks for taking time for us.
Always great to be here. Thanks, Rick.
So what'd you see today?
Well, it was very interesting. I mean, we're talking about what is right now maybe the third consecutive week of protests. They've sort of accelerated and grown in size in some ways. I'll talk a little bit more about why in a moment. But what we have so far, and again, there are likely to be some disruptions during the vote as we speak right now. But this morning in the House, when they were passing the bill, they were sort of giving speeches, and then they had this thing called a motion to recommit where the Democrats try to scuttle it at the last minute. And including during Speaker Paul Ryan's speech, individuals would get up one by one and start chanting, "You lie, you're a liar. This is going to kill real people." And in some cases, as you note, these are people with disabilities. So there were some people that did not have disabilities. There were some people with disabilities as well. This came, and of course, the moment they do that, they're hauled off by the sergeant at arms, and they're arrested. They're put in sort of plastic zip ties. It's sort of a temporary arrest, and there are people that are standing at the ready to bail them out, and it's kind of a nuisance. Last night, there was another mass arrest of 68 people in the rotunda of one of the Senate office buildings. And then, of course, later today, this afternoon, there was a die-in outside the office of Senator Susan Collins, and I believe potentially Jeff Flake as well. And from that, there were 9 other arrests. So this has been coming in waves. There was a day, I believe it was 2 weeks ago, where there were well over 100 in a single day. And so this is not just the DAP, but there is someone called Adi Barkan, who is the founder of a group called Fed Up, which has been pushing the Federal Reserve to think about workers more. And he was diagnosed with ALS a year ago, and so he sort of brought his personal story to commit an act of civil disobedience. As his body deteriorates, he probably won't be able to fly back and forth to Washington so often. And then by chance, a couple weeks ago, he ran into Senator Jeff Flake of Arizona on a plane. And complete happenstance, and a progressive communication strategist was also on the plane and happened to film their conversation. That went viral, and then you sort of saw him take off, and his brand and his personal story float up in the media, and a lot of folks ended up getting more into the protests in solidarity with him.
No, I mean, there are tons of these stories out there. And look, every time we see a budget cut, we know who it's going to affect. It's going to affect the most vulnerable. And these folks, they get that. Every time there's a cut, their standard of living goes down. Their life expectancy goes down. So look, I mean, it's only predictable that they would be the ones on the front lines right now.
Yeah, and here's the thing, Rick. I mean, I think that this was an easier play. This was an easier connection for people to make in the public when you were dealing with the Affordable Care Act repeal. And you mentioned ADAPT, and they've been doing this work for years and years and years, and they really came through. The folks that are paraplegic and really dependent on Medicaid, in some cases coming down on overnight buses from Rochester, New York, and situations like that. And I think that was a more natural connection for some of the less versed of us to make when it was literally a program where Medicaid was about to be cut. Now, it's important to understand the bank shot here of the spending cuts that would occur as a result of this bill. They're really talking about basically 3 things. They're talking about something called PAYGO. So according to the official scorekeepers, this bill, this tax cut bill, which is cutting taxes on corporations and reducing the estate tax for the millionaires, is being paid for, or there's so many cuts that it's adding $1 trillion to the public debt over 10 years, as we know it from the nonpartisan sort of scorekeepers. There's this joint committee on taxation in Congress. Now, as a result of rules that President Obama updated have been in place, there's these rules that are called pay-as-you-go rules, or PAYGO.
Right.
And as a result, if nothing is done and there aren't budget cuts through another mechanism and congressional leaders don't waive these PAYGO cuts, there would be across-the-board cuts to everything, including Medicare and Medicaid. That's the first thing. And they've only gotten verbal commitments so far from McConnell that that's going to occur after the bill's passed. It wasn't baked into the bill that PAYGO would be waived. They said they would do it after the bill's been passed. I ran into Ron Johnson, the senator from Wisconsin, today. He said, we're going to cut so much in the budget that we pass anyway that we won't need PAYGO. Well, oh well. The second thing is that by repealing the individual insurance mandate, the Congressional Budget Office says that's 13 million people right there down the line that don't get health coverage. They're basically taking apart Obamacare through this law. And then the third thing that I think kind of wraps both of these together is just that Paul Ryan, the House Speaker, immediately said, and everybody who knows his history knows, that his real passion isn't just taxes. It's gutting our social insurance programs and our welfare state. And he said, that's what's next. And you can just imagine the sort of shamelessness of the Republicans that they will turn around in a moment after this gets passed and say, oh my God, the debt is so big. We have no choice but to cut the programs that vulnerable people in society depend on. And so that was the message these folks were bringing. And in some ways, I wish this had been the there was a lot of organizing around the tax bill, but it seems like this is the message that's resonated because you connect it to real people. And that's sometimes hard when you're dealing with something complicated like taxes.
No, and this is what I've been saying for a while. You've got to make this personal. And these stories are personal because, look, I've yet to meet anyone who says that we should be giving more to the wealthy, more to big corporations. And, oh, by the way, sorry, we can't help you with Medicaid or Medicare, or sorry, Granny, cat food for you.
Yeah. I mean, right. Right. When you frame it that way, it's a little harder. And I think what the claims that the Republicans have been making, they're claiming that by lowering the corporate tax rate to the top rate to 21%, that corporations are just they're gonna make it rain jobs. Well, we've already seen CEOs and major Wall Street firms talking about how this is actually really just going to lead them. It's going to boost their stock prices, and then they're going to do things called stock buybacks, and they're going to pay out higher dividends. I mean, that's what they've already been doing for the past 7-8 years. It's what they did when George W. Bush gave them a holiday to bring their profits home. So, that's sort of the way they're framing it. And I got to tell you, though, I think based on the public polling, you're absolutely right. Folks aren't buying it, and we may have seen a little bit of that in Alabama. We might see more of it in November.
Yeah, I'm not putting too much in Alabama. At the end of the day, the guy was still an accused pedophile. That's a huge part of that, I think, anyway. But I think you're right. The public looks at this tax plan, and I keep going, where's the Tea Party in all of this? I heard them for years screaming about, I'm taxed enough already. And yet we know out of this, Daniel, that by 2027, a good majority of us, 90 million homes, are going to see tax increases.
Right. So the various budgeting rules that they had to adhere to make this all work and to make it be something that could pass a 50-vote threshold in the Senate meant that they made the corporate taxes they decided to prioritize in terms of how they were going to shift the cost. The corporate taxes are permanent, and the lower individual tax rates expire in something like 2025. Now, even with those lower individual rates, Rick, there are all kinds of loopholes they're closing, whether it's the state and local tax deduction, which is for, that's going to turn upper middle class folks in blue states against the more generous welfare state in those states. I think they've gotten rid of personal exemptions. So, per child. So it ends up being a wash for the ordinary person anyway. And I think one thing that's interesting to watch, though, is let's say Democrats are in power in 2025 and you've got all these sort of tax cuts expiring, the rate cuts for, the sort of middle of the spectrum, that will put Democrats in an awkward position of either maintaining those lower rates, which, the government needs for revenue, or being branded as people that are hiking taxes on the middle class. So it's a little bit Machiavellian.
Oh, absolutely. No, I mean, and as you said from a minute ago, the long-term game plan is to come back and say, hey, we're broke. We can't afford these luxuries like Medicare, like Medicaid, like food stamps, like children's health insurance. You can go down the list of all the things that they're going to say, sorry, we're broke.
Yeah, I mean, it's really unbelievable. And look, I'm not a fan of generational warfare framing at all. But it so happens, there was again another nonpartisan organization, the Joint Committee on Tax, the Tax Policy Center, that looked at this both by income and by age relative to 65 or over or under. The folks that are getting hit hardest by this are people in my generation, millennials. A lot of us are growing up with college degrees, working at Starbucks, working multiple jobs, still living in our parents' homes. We've got student debt. We've got the dwindling, the winnowing out, the hollowing out of sort of the blue collar workforce, as you well know, and deunionization and deregulation and working for temp agencies and all that stuff. And then you're going to come around and tell us that the extremely modest social insurance program that our parents had is not going to, that you're going to cut that because it's unsustainable. I mean, we're going to need that stuff more, I would say. And that's not to say that there isn't enormous poverty over the age of 65, but it was a little bit of a different economy when folks were growing up then.
No, I absolutely agree with you. And this is where I keep telling people, don't wish this stuff away, because there's going to be a moment when you or your children or somebody you know is going to need food stamps, school lunch programs, heating assistance. You can go down the line. And yet we're going to sacrifice all of those things, it's my belief, so that, well, the great-great-great-great-grandchildren of, name the billionaire, never has to work a day in their lives.
You know what's kind of remarkable about this, Rick, and so disturbing is that you talked about the Tea Party and the kind of the inconsistency or the hypocrisy of caring about the debt and the deficit at one moment and then ramming through this thing that blows a hole in the budget to give money to wealthy folks. Or if you claim to care about that deficit stuff, a lot of us think that to begin with was a wrong premise and that's its own thing. But what we're really realizing is that you can go to these folks, these Republican lawmakers who are claiming, oh, don't worry, the official scorekeepers, the Congressional Budget Office, and the Joint Committee on Taxation, we're going to make sure it goes through that. Well, all of a sudden they get a bad score on that. They say, well, they didn't take into account of this, they didn't take into account of that. And they've got media outlets that cater to folks that tell them all the stuff you're hearing about this tax bill is wrong. And so we have these clannish bubbles that prevent us from actually sometimes confronting the fact that, from realizing that, these corporate tax cuts have not been proven to generate economic growth that affects ordinary workers, that this is going to blow a hole, at least in the budget that these conservatives claim to care about, and that it will then lay the groundwork for social program cuts. And that's why I think outlets like yours are so important, because you're speaking to working people and you're a voice that people trust. And there's so little of that right now, because what they're relying on is that a lot of Americans don't culturally identify with the folks at the New York Times or on NBC News or on CNN, and so they just don't believe them anymore, and they've gotten so disillusioned.
No, I'm right there with you. But at the end of the day, on a visceral level, we've seen this movie over and over again, and giving huge amounts of tax cuts to the wealthy and corporations has never, in my view, brought in more revenue. It's never meant higher wages. It's never meant more jobs. And in fact, you alluded to a moment ago when George W. Bush allowed all these companies to bring back their stolen profits and go, hey, what was it? Something like 60 to 90 cents of every dollar brought back was spent on stock buybacks. I mean, it's outrageous.
No, I mean it is totally outrageous, and
we're going to do it again.
Look,
I mean, that's the thing that really just ticks me off. We're going to do it again.
Well, yeah, we're giving them another tax holiday to bring their foreign profit home, and we've also switched to a territorial tax system in this bill where we're only charging them on the amount on their foreign profits that weren't taxed by that foreign country already. So there's so many different little special interest goodies that were stuck into this that we're only just now fully understanding the significance of them. And look, you said at a visceral level, Rob Portman, the Republican senator from Ohio, he was sort of giving one of these storyboard presentations in the evening just now in the Senate gallery while I was there, and he said, they say the proof's in the pudding. Well, the proof will be in the paycheck, and I think that's about right. I think we'll definitely see. I think the way to overcome the different cultural barriers is, what's the proof in the paycheck? And look, I'm not just worried about the fact that there's not going to be trickle down. You've got this Bitcoin craze out there, the gutting Dodd-Frank, and now you're handing rich people so much money they're not going to know what to do with it. We're going to look at another financial bubble that ordinary working people are then going to have to clean up and pay the price for again, and start at a different starting point further back than we were.
You are
so
absolutely.
It's there's so many layers to this.
You are absolutely right. And then we're going to be, you got to sacrifice, got to tighten the belt, Daniel. Got to tighten the belt.
Right. Yeah, look, I think if there's any, and I think, look, if Democrats are looking at this and just thinking that they can do this, they can. I think a lot of them now, they're kind of buoyed by the good results in Virginia elections, the unexpected result in Alabama, even though it was opposite an alleged pedophile, and they're thinking, well, the Republicans are just shooting themselves in the foot. We're just got to put this on auto drive. But we've seen that movie before too. In 2006 and 2008, Democrats took back Congress, And then in 2008, there was a supermajority in the Senate. Of course, Barack Obama was elected. Two mistakes that Democrats cannot afford to make again, because this is what happens. Voters are just disillusioned, and they're throwing people out who don't improve their lives and who end up helping out their cronies.
Yep.
And I think for all that Barack Obama accomplished, Democrats have to be honest about two big mistakes that he made in those first 2 years when he controlled Congress. He did not provide real relief to homeowners. Instead, he had this crazy slush fund that helped the mortgage servicers. That was the HAMP program as part of the bailout. And then the second thing was he pivoted to deficit reduction, the tightening of the belts. And he said, well, Americans are tightening their belts, and folks are wondering when's the government going to do it? And that was just wrong on the merits.
I agree.
When Americans are tightening their belts, the government needs to spend more to make up for it. And so I think that the real we can sit here and we can rail against the Republicans and the right wing and all that, but if Democrats don't have a plan for the day after, then I think history will be doomed to repeat itself.
No, absolutely. And I've been saying the day is right now. They've got to come out with their plan, and they got to be hammering on it and laying the groundwork. And people on the street have got to be organizing around it. Look, the New Deal didn't just happen. There were decades of organizing that went into that and pushing and all of that, and it needs to happen again. And what we saw today, people organizing and pushing back, it's absolutely what we need. Daniel, I appreciate you taking time. Good on you. Good stuff. I look forward to talking to you again.
All right, great to talk to you, Rick.
Thanks so much, Daniel Mehrens, Huffington Post reporter. You got to check out his article on today's die-in. We'll get a link at thericksmithshow.com. Again, just maddening. Love to hear your thoughts. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. Where working people come to talk.
We're in a fight to bring the middle class back, and we ain't even planning on losing in this mighty war. The working class is under attack. Get up, fight on. Stand up, fight on. Yes, we can fight on. To the death, fight on. Get up, fight on. Stand up, fight on. Yes, we can fight on.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Food corporations and their academic cohorts keep trying to make an industrial tomato to rival Mother Nature's product. And they keep failing. They might consider this instead, the Rutgers 250. It's a revived version of the classic hybrid tomato bred in 1934 by Rutgers University and Campbell Soup. Its excellent flavor and texture made the Rutgers variety the tomato of choice for years, eventually accounting for 60% of all tomatoes grown commercially in the U.S. But it fell out of favor in the 1960s when big industrial growers in California and Florida switched to hard and tasteless tomatoes bred to withstand the crushing power of the harvesting machines they had begun using. The Rutgers variety soon disappeared from grocery bins and was forgotten until 2009. That year, with the good food movement mushrooming and with consumers demanding that supermarkets sell truly flavorful tomatoes, plant breeders discovered that Campbell still had genetic material from the parent plants used 75 years earlier to develop the original Rutgers variety. So, for 8 years, they've been working with it again, using crossbreeding techniques that go back to Latin America's pre-Columbian natives. Slowly but surely, they brought back the Rutgers and its natural flavor, glowingly described as, quote, the very taste of summer. The resurrected Rutgers is not hard enough to be machine harvested and shipped across country, which is one of its major virtues. The fact that this tomato must be grown and marketed regionally is one step toward a decentralized, deindustrialized, and better food economy. This is Jim Hightower saying, instead of trying to squeeze nature into a high-tech corporate model, this tomato represents an understanding that our food system can and should cooperate with nature and foster the growth of regional economies.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to. For information, visit hightowerlowdown.org.
The most important issues of the day. This is The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out ricksmithshow.com. Let's find out. Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. Let's find out on this very Merry Christmas edition of the, hey, no coal for you. What a great tax day today has turned out to be. Let's find out what's going on in New York and around the world. Luke Vargas, Talk Media News. Luke, thanks for taking time for us.
You're very welcome. Glad to be with you.
So happy tax day.
So excited.
Are you running the numbers? Are you gonna be able to cash in on this windfall coming your way?
Not if the bill goes into its 11th year. I looked. I think my tax bracket's going to get like a 23% increase in taxes if the plan goes all the way out. And of course, that's because the math for this is only semi-palatable if you completely, front load all the benefits to the budget or all the, incentives for the cuts, and then put up all the increases to pay for it later on. But I'm probably going to save a few $100 next year, but I'm not thrilled about it, I guess.
So the question is this simpler than it would have been? Because I was told this was going to simplify everything. It's going to be a postcard.
No, I haven't heard any, real analysis here that suggests we're going to get anywhere close to that postcard. And a lot of that's because some of the deductions that the original House bill had aimed to take out have been put back in. I mean, they were talking about all sorts of things being eliminated. The interest, mortgage interest deduction, various things for people in post-secondary education. We're going to lose their abilities to deduct that tuition. The electric vehicle tax credit is still in this bill. So there are a lot of itemized deductions which were on the cutting board at first, but were actually going to be in the final bill.
Yeah, interesting. Well, like I've been saying, we're going to find out, and hopefully the people that are going to be hit by this, they wake up and they make those pay.
Well, one thing
I understand yesterday the UN Security Council 14-1 against us, huh?
Yeah. Before we move on, though, I just want to say one part of that bill that really stuck out to me was that Puerto Rico is classified as a foreign territory, and this had been a topic that the Puerto Rican governor and lawmakers there had been really working on to try and get changed in the bill. Because again, the major thrust of this tax effort is not really a tax reform, it's a corporate tax cut. And the goal is to get money that's overseas and bring it back to the United States by lowering the U.S. corporate tax rate. And so the question is, what do you do with Puerto Rico? Because there is a lot of American multinational companies that have money over in Puerto Rico. And the fear is if Puerto Rico is classed as a foreign territory, then it's going to be advantageous, just as it is for, let's say, Apple or someone to try and bring their money to the United States. Then people will pull their money out of Puerto Rico too. And all of the efforts of the Puerto Rican delegation failed. And Puerto Rico in the final bill is classified as a foreign territory. And the governor tonight saying that everything is on the table. We're going to analyze those who turned their back on Puerto Rico. They're going to basically try to instruct Puerto Ricans who have left the island to try and vote out Republicans, mostly in Florida, who stood by this bill, even though it was really kind of screwing over Puerto Rico. So they're calling this Hurricane Maria #2 because of the economic impact it's going to have on them. So kind of a toxic element of that bill that I'm surprised was not taken out somewhere in the negotiation process.
Well, and again, I look at Trump and maybe a lot of people who don't understand that Puerto Rico is a U.S. territory.
Yeah. No, I think there are some pretty cynical reads you could take on why Puerto Rican interests were basically ignored here on something that I don't know why it needed to be in the bill. Going to your question on the United Nations. So yes, the U.S. got really embarrassed by a 14-1 vote on the Security Council. They were condemning President Trump's decision to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, and the U.S. vetoed that. So now this goes to the UN General Assembly. So all of the countries of the world, 193 states, are going to vote on this on Thursday. And we're expecting a very lopsided vote there as well. And as someone who is very interested in seeing sort of how the world votes on crucial issues and who they're listening to and gauging American interest or American popularity around the world, I think this is going to be quite a telling vote. And particularly because we've seen Nikki Haley come out, the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations today, said the U.S. will be watching. We've helped out a lot of countries around the world, and we want you to not prevent us from making sovereign decisions. So the U.S. is watching. We've heard that the Israeli government has told all of their embassies around the world to talk to the governments of those host countries and lobby them to back the United States on this and not vote for this condemning resolution. And that'll be interesting because we've seen from Prime Minister Netanyahu over the last few years something we call the Israeli charm offensive. Netanyahu has spent a lot of time outside of Israel in the past 2 years, going to South America, going to Central and West and Sub-Saharan Africa, and bringing along Israeli tech entrepreneurs and heads of pharmaceutical companies, and saying basically, we'll help you turn that seawater into drinking water, or we'll help you cure some tropical disease and make development towards a green economy easier if you vote with Israel at the United Nations. And we had seen some reports that various countries, small countries in Africa, had gone along with this, that they had promised that support. So this will be a test to see sort of where all those different factors, measure against each other. I'm quite interested to see how that vote shapes up. But again, even if it passes overwhelmingly, it doesn't mean anything. The U.S. Cannot be forced to change its decision of recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, but it does show where the world's allegiances lie.
No, or as the Bush era, either you're with us or you're against us.
Sure, that's definitely the kind of tone that Nikki Haley was putting out today, saying we will be watching these votes very carefully. I've got to think that it's going to be a very lopsided vote against the United States. I mean, there had been some suggestion that Israel had new ties with various countries in the Middle East, that the Saudis were working with the Israeli military and intelligence, and the Jordanians and the Egyptians. That's certainly true, but as analysts have put it to me, Israel is always the mistress in this arrangement. They're the country that a lot of other countries want to work with behind the scenes because they do have great intelligence. Their military is quite trusted in the region, but the populations of countries like Egypt or Saudi Arabia, it's just a non-starter to start to recognize Jerusalem as the Israeli capital. So I think come voting day, it's going to be very tipped against the U.S. and Israel.
Yeah, well, we'll see where they go. And like you said, it's not really going to matter. It's going to do it anyway. So, but you're right. Interesting to watch. Also, I guess rebels in Yemen fired another long-range missile at Saudi Arabia?
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. This plays into the Trump administration line that they've been promoting, trying to get more countries to turn against Iran in the region. You saw Nikki Haley last week standing in front of a big missile that they'd recovered from Saudi Arabia several months ago, and people were sort of saying this is the Colin Powell moment, where the U.S. is saying without any shred of a doubt that this is conclusive evidence of Iran supplying other actors, sort of terror groups and rebels in the Middle East, with these ballistic missile parts. A lot of other countries, including our allies, are not so convinced that this evidence is quite as airtight as the U.S. is making it seem. But that said, another missile apparently coming out of Yemen, flying towards a major population center, apparently to try and hit a palace where the Saudi king was giving a government meeting, does feed into this U.S. line that Iran is just destabilizing the entire region. And I'll point out the French this week. French President Emmanuel Macron and their foreign minister are saying they're actually starting to side with the U.S. here and are thinking about putting new sanctions on Iran, even if it could potentially upset the Iranian nuclear deal. So again, President Trump, I think the read here is that the Middle East is getting a little bit more hostile, that this Shia-Sunni conflict is heating up, but Trump does appear to be winning over some Western European countries in sort of seeing the conflict through his eyes.
Interesting. And we'll see where that takes us. Also, I understand that there are several European countries that have agreed to fund a super railroad in South America. What's going on there?
I love infrastructure stories, so I hope I'm not reaching too far down into page A30 of the newspaper here for a story. But this is pretty cool. I mean, there's long been talk about mega infrastructure projects in South America. If you look to Asia, I mean, China is building the Silk Road Initiative. There are all sorts of major transport links in the process. And as a result, Asia and Asian export markets are getting incredibly competitive. Latin America and South America in particular really lag behind. There's a statistic that across all of the developed countries of the world, averaged out, the cost of infrastructure in the price of an export is about 10%, which means goods get to market relatively cheaply. In South America, that's up to 35% in some cases. It's, and when the world, it's a world economy and countries can decide between any number of suppliers for something, that really hurts those South American countries. So this is a proposal to make a rail link that goes from Brazil through Bolivia and to Peru, and it would take those Brazilian exports. China is, I believe, the biggest purchaser of Brazilian goods, bring them to the Pacific coast and reduce the export time of those goods from Brazil to China by 25 days. So it's a dramatically cheaper Let's see if this goes through, but if it does, it helps bring a region that has been, sort of perpetually behind the curve when it comes to global economic competitiveness, and start to see them hopefully become a little bit more competitive.
What's interesting to me is you've got these several European countries doing it. This is stuff that we used to do for generations, not so much anymore, I think.
Yeah, I think there are political reasons, especially with governments in Latin America, particularly in a country like Bolivia. It would be almost a non-starter for Evo Morales to let the U.S. imperialists fund any sort of infrastructure project down there. But you're right. I mean, the U.S. is not really playing a role in global infrastructure, global trade infrastructure, and we've ceded that largely to the Chinese. This is maybe being paid for by European dollars, but it's a way of helping China expand its trade influence.
So why doesn't China do it?
They've been trying. The Chinese route is still on the table. I think it goes through more protected environmental areas and has encountered more political opposition. I think they're still weighing whether or not to do this. This is a counterproposal, and I think the reason you're seeing this is from several European countries that could stand to have their own trained manufacturers and engineers and technology companies benefit from this. But the Chinese have definitely thought about it, and they're working on many, many projects like this elsewhere in the world, including the new canal in Central America, which is sort of another project similar to this in its design and goals.
Yeah, when we were the world's manufacturer, we used to do this stuff as well.
Yeah.
I guess we're moving away from it, right?
Yeah, I don't see, especially since President Trump came out this week with his big national security strategy. He's talking about putting, America back on top of the world stage when it comes to economic competitiveness, but no talk about how he's actually planning to build an economic, infrastructure, global economic trade infrastructure that's going to help out U.S. exports. And I think this is China's game at this point, but I'm not surprised to see the European Union trying to get in here as well.
All right, and finally, I understand there's a new University of California study out on the non-lethal crowd control methods that are out there, like rubber bullets. They're saying it's still too dangerous to be used?
One very much so. They looked at 30 years worth of records on rubber and plastic bullets, beanbag rounds, which are another one of these ammunitions which are supposed to be non-lethal, and shot pellets. And they found almost 2,000 reported injuries, 53 deaths, 300 people permanently disabled. The big takeaway here is that these weapons have guidelines which are so specific that they can never really truly be implemented in the field. They say, for some of these, police need to be 75 feet away from the person they're shooting at. But it's very hard to gauge these things in the moment, and that when you start to leave this very narrow guidelines for how to use these sorts of projectiles, the danger increases dramatically, and they can become lethal. If a police officer steps further back and is aiming from farther back, these projectiles, which are aimed to expand in the air to slow down their impact, are very unpredictable. They don't actually sort of go where they're aimed, and thus if you're trying to shoot someone in the leg, you may be shooting them in the face or the neck, and then these things become lethal. You go too close, and the projectile doesn't have enough time to slow down and dampen its impact, and they can cause a serious injury or death in some cases. So again, Physicians for Human Rights is a big group behind this. They say it's time for police forces to either stop using these for the basic peaceful crowd control means, or for there to be some sort of international regulations about when these can be used, and to sort of standardize regulation of this. But again, a lot of evidence that these supposedly non-lethal crowd control methods can be anything but that when police units actually take them into the field.
Yeah, anything other than rubber bullets? I mean, I know we've got all kinds of, sound cannons and water cannons and the goodbye gun that makes you feel like you're on fire, and there are all kinds of things out there. Did they look at any of the other stuff?
They didn't. They were just focused here. But one big takeaway is they were saying if you're going to use these, you really need to limit their use to situations where this kind of force is appropriate and can actually de-escalate the situation. Saying, look, we should only be using these if someone is trying to be arrested for a violent act, or if there's a riot that is so serious that it's threatening other people's safety. When in fact, a lot of the times these weapons are brought out by police is to break up peaceful protests, to try and just get people out of an area. And it's such a disproportional type of force that can actually escalate situations. And I think that's the kind of discussion in the wake of this body cam footage coming out of Arizona of a man in in a hotel room who was essentially seemed executed in the hallway almost. Why is police force being brought into situations and so many people yelling or so many people making threats and demands of people as opposed to trying to de-escalate the situation as almost the top goal of law enforcement? So I think this sort of fits into that discussion. This kind of force, at least according to this study, doesn't really achieve a lot of its objectives when actually deployed.
There you go. Luke, I appreciate the time. Thanks so much.
You're very welcome. Glad to talk to you.
Luke Vargas, Talk Media News. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. Let's find out on this day in labor history. The year was 1983. That was the day that a bitter national strike of Greyhound workers came to a close. Nearly 13,000 bus drivers, mechanics, and clerks had gone on strike. They were members of the Amalgamated Transit Union. Contract negotiations had gotten off to a foreboding start that year. The company had demanded deep cuts in both wages and benefits. At the same time, management was set to receive a 10% wage increase. Deregulation in the industry had resulted in a rise of low-fare, non-unionized bus companies. But even with that, Greyhound was still making a profit. ATU members voted overwhelmingly to reject management's proposal. That November, they went out on strike. Greyhound responded by bringing in scab workers to drive the buses. The news media, including Dan Rather at CBS News, reported on the development.
Violence and the threat of violence rode the nation's highways today as Greyhound resumed limited bus service in the midst of a bitter strike. Police listed more than 100 arrests around the country.
In Zanesville, Ohio, bringing in strike breakers led to tragedy. One of these scab drivers plowed his bus through a line of union picketers. One of the strikers, Ray Phillips, was hit and killed. Ray was a steward and former president of his local union. No one was ever held accountable for the killing of Ray Phillips. The strike ended with the workers taking a nearly 8% pay cut. They also lost vacation days and saw a reduction in their benefits. It was another bitter defeat for labor in the same year that saw President Ronald Reagan bust the Air Traffic Controllers Union. From the skies to the roads, American workers were and continue to be under attack. Today's Labor History in 2 brought to you in memory of Carol Hillman, a passionate friend of workers and volunteer of the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
We're talking about the time of
Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. One of those moments, and it doesn't happen often, but one of those elections where it's just, one vote. Just one vote. You know how you hear every vote matters? Every vote counts. Every vote is important. Did you know? Well, in Virginia, that one vote really did matter because that's what separated victory for the Democrat Shelley Simons, who appears to have won a Virginia House seat by one single vote, 11,608 to 11,607. One vote. And now why that one vote is so important is this makes a 50-50 tie. This means that the House there is now even. That means that the Democratic governor and lieutenant governor have the House. Think about this for the power of just that one vote. And this is why I keep telling everyone, every election cycle, you've got to get out and vote. You have got to become a super voter. It doesn't matter, every election. And this is one of those things we train our kids to make sure that their voices are heard, to make sure that they understand that every election matters. And I would argue the off-year elections are most important. If you're going to take a year off, you have to. A presidential election is where I would take off. The odd year elections, those are most important because those are the people who are your dog catchers and your tax collectors and your local people. they're really important. They affect your lives much more than the president does. And 2018 is coming. Get registered. If you're in a state that has a voter ID, get an ID. But make sure that you have the ability to exercise your franchise. Because you know what? You could have been that one. Now, understand, there's going to be, I'm sure, tons of legal challenges coming, all of that. But look, nobody thought Virginia was going to get flipped like this. Nobody. This is the kind of stuff we got to carry into 2018. That's simple. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, going to talk about the attacks on the EPA, the attacks on public sector workers. So much to get to. Stick around. This is The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
From New York, this is your world in 2 minutes. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, for Talk Media News. For the second time in 2 months, Saudi Arabia says it's intercepted a missile fired by Iranian-backed rebels in Yemen. The missile reportedly traveled hundreds of miles from Yemen toward the Saudi capital of Riyadh. Yemen's Houthi rebels with long-range missile technology, evidence, they say, of Iran's intent to destabilize the Middle East. That U.S. campaign against Iran appears to have a new ally, France. Foreign Minister Jean-Yves Le Drian said on Monday that France is increasingly concerned with Iran's ballistic missile technology, and he didn't rule out the possibility of imposing new sanctions on Iran over its behavior. But while the Trump administration may have found another partner willing to publicly condemn Iran, French officials have repeatedly said they wish to keep a 2015 nuclear deal in place, something President Trump has not yet committed to. And speaking of missiles and missile defense, Japan has now agreed to acquire a pair of American-made missile defense systems in an effort to defend against North Korea. Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's government had been eyeing a number of U.S.-made missile defense systems, but settled on Lockheed Martin's Aegis Ashore system because of its cost and wide geographic range. The two onshore missile defense sites are estimated to cost over $1.5 billion, but will reportedly be able to protect all of Japan's mainland. Thanks to a pacifist post-war constitution, Japan's military has long lagged behind its peers in the Asia-Pacific, but that's changed in recent years as Prime Minister Abe allocated more money for national defense and has sought to modify the Japanese constitution to give the country greater ability to assist its allies in the event of conflict. For more global news headlines, visit TalkMediaNews.com.
There is no other agency like the EPA. It should really be renamed the Job-Killing Organization of America.
Because, brothers, it's a fact. If we take and don't put back, they'll have to pay for all we did. So let's leave some blue up above us. Let's leave some green on the ground. It's only ours to follow. Let's save some for tomorrow. We can pass it on.
Yes, the Job-Killing Organization of America. And look, she was as crazy as a loon to begin with. But here's the thing. The one thing the Republicans do better than the Democrats is they get on a message. And it doesn't matter the forum, it doesn't matter the context, it doesn't matter whatever you ask them, they're gonna regurgitate ad nauseum their talking points. And one of them is that the EPA is bad. The Job-Killing Organization, that regulations are bad. And we've heard this over and over and over and over again. And it's one of those things that if you hear it enough, some people who aren't paying attention might actually believe it. And look, I go back to, my childhood. I grew up in Cleveland during the height of the steel industry with lead gasoline and smog and acid rain. And it's because of smart policy, smart regulation, job protections that, we don't have a lot of those problems today. And we've got an administration now that's hell-bent on taking us back, which is why when I see more attacks against the EPA, when I see more attacks against public sector workers, It infuriates me, which is why I've asked John O'Grady to come talk with us. He's the president of the American Federation of Government Employees, National Council of EPA Locals, number 238. John, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you for having us once again.
So am I getting this right? Now there's a new organization throwing out the same kind of twisted rhetoric and attacks against you guys?
Well, I think it's all variations on a theme. It's some contingent of the ultra-right who don't seem to like environmental regulations. They're necessary in order to guarantee that all of us who have a right have clean air, clean water, and clean land.
Let me ask you this, because, we just saw another win for the wealth class. The moneyed interest got what they wanted in this tax bill. And I've been saying for a very long time, the moneyed interests want voiceless, desperate workers. They want policies that benefit them, and the hell with the rest of us. I look at all of these attacks against not just the EPA, but public sector workers as part of the same kind of scheme to undermine our ability to have policies that benefit not just us, but all of us. Am I somewhere in the right ballpark?
Yeah, I think we're heading back toward a gilded age where we will be indentured servants, basically, and I wouldn't be surprised if they come up with a brilliant idea to have company-run stores or government-run stores, and we can exchange our pay for food and whatever.
Well, we're already doing that, John. A lot of employers are trying to get us to take those crummy credit cards instead of paychecks. Here, take a credit card, and by the way, we'll charge you fees and all kinds of stuff, but it'll be great. It'll be convenient for you.
Yeah. They never cease to amaze me. And the question is, can we hold them off at the gate long enough until we have some sort of a change in Congress and in the White House? There's an incredible number of people in this country that apparently think that they like President Trump and his policies, but I don't think they pay very close attention, because tonight they're voting, I believe, in the Senate to take away more of our benefits through the new tax code, which is going to benefit really primarily the 1%ers.
No, and look, it's going to benefit the 1%, and the rest of us are going to end up paying for it in the long run. But, it's not just this. It's this whole scheme, and I don't know if you saw this. I'm sure you did. Claire McCaskill released some confidential information that evidently next year, in the fiscal year of 2019, the Republicans are going to go after freezing federal workers' paychecks because you guys just make way too much money.
Well, yeah, and I did read that, and that's not the only thing that's going on. That certainly concerns me, but worse than that, apparently Mr. Pruitt, the head of the EPA now under President Trump, has apparently sent a reorganization plan to the Office of Management and Budget that would basically get rid of all of the regional offices and replace them with mini offices in each of the state capitals, which is an astoundingly expensive program to do, but I believe it's the step they want to take in order to get rid of EPA, get rid of it as a cohesive unit. And then the next step would be, well, EPA workers on the federal level really are just going to be state workers, and then it's going to all just disappear.
So you're even thinking further down the line than I am, because look, I'm just looking at his plan and really the Trump administration's plan with James Shirk at the head of that thought process to just squeeze you guys out. You're talking about them just completely doing away with you, and then it's a states' rights issue, and then good luck getting any type of cross-border cohesive cooperation, and basically we're going to go backwards.
Well, one thing that the Republicans are is extremely disciplined. I wish the Democrats were as disciplined as the Republicans, but go back to 2001 and the quote by Grover Norquist that he wants to shrink government to the size where it can be drowned in a bathtub.
Yep. That's
a real quote, and that's a real aspiration, and they are still working toward that goal. They don't give up. They keep chipping away.
And this tax plan's a big part of that, isn't it?
Who's going to pay for the debt? It's going to increase the debt by another $1.5 trillion. Who's going to pay for that? Well, I'll tell you, it's going to be us, the middle class, if there's any of us left.
Yeah, and I look at the head of the EPA, who seems to be kind of a paranoid guy. He's got his own skiff, his soundproof phone booth. He's got a 24-hour security detail. And I guess just in March, we, the taxpayers, spent like $3,000 to have his office swept so that there would be no bugs or illegal listening devices in his office. I'm like, paranoid much?
Yeah, he's a real piece of work. He is, I think, living in some sort of a dream world and thinks he's Agent 99 on Get Smart or something with his phone booth. He doesn't share anything with people. Everything's by word of mouth, which is actually a very smart thing if you're being nefarious, and I believe they are. And I believe that their intention is to continue to chip away at not just EPA, but HUD. They're going to chip away at the Veterans Administration. They're going to go after the Food and Drug Administration. You name it, they're going to go after it.
Well,
and
John, to be honest, they've been upfront about that. I mean, look, you've got someone like Rick Perry in charge of the Department of Energy, who was very clear when he ran for president, he wanted to abolish it. You got someone like Betsy DeVos, who in charge of education, who doesn't believe in public education. You got someone like Ben Carson, who knows nothing about housing policy, wants to do away with that. I mean, you've got your guy, Scott Pruitt, who sued the EPA numerous times, wants to destroy that. None of this is surprising. I guess the question is when do we, the sane, the rational, the voters, say enough is enough?
Well, hopefully people will say that in November of 2018, but I quite frankly can't wait. We were just informed today that a former head of the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources under Scott Walker was named as the regional administrator in Chicago. She's going to head up the largest region in the country, the region that has the greatest enforcement expertise and produces year after year the best enforcement numbers in terms of keeping companies and polluters in line. And she has a high school degree.
You're kidding me.
No.
Did she even take, I know I shouldn't ask this. Did she even take environmental science in high school?
Oh, they probably didn't have it in her high school. She has a high school degree. She was a home builder. Her and her husband owned some kind of a business. She became a state senator. She must have been a big contributor, and Scott Walker put her in charge of the Wisconsin DNR, and she did horrible things to it over 6 years, and it's still recovering. And now she's at US EPA.
So what do we do, John? I mean, look, you hear all these horror stories, and you look at all of this stuff, and there are real, very real, deadly consequences here. I mean, all of this attack on regulation and on job protections, there are real deadly consequences here. What do we do?
Well, all of us need to wake up and realize politicians want two things from us. One is our vote, and two, our money. And we need to make sure that they understand we're not giving them either until they start voting correctly. And that means we have to get on the phone with them, email them, write them letters, go visit them personally. We can't give up. We have to make such a scream about it, just like they did about the Cuyahoga River in Cleveland, that people say, oh my gosh, we better address this. We better do something about this.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. I grew up in Cleveland, so thanks for bringing that.
Well, Cleveland looks beautiful now.
It does.
It's fantastic, and it wouldn't have been if the good people of Cleveland and Ohio got the rest of this country motivated to do something about it.
No, you're absolutely right, and I say that all the time. Look, I grew up in the 70s when the air quality was terrible. We had lead gasoline and acid rain, and the asthma rates for kids in my class were just through the roof. And because of and look, the lake was completely dead when I was a kid. You weren't allowed to go swimming in the lake at all. And the only time when I was a kid, I thought fish swam sideways. turns out they were all dead, which is why I thought that. But here again, over this period of time, we've cleaned that up through smart regulation. And I don't want my children and eventually their children to have to relive that, which seems to be where we're going.
We are going backwards. People forget that it took us a good 47 years to get to this point now, and it doesn't take much to go backwards. So
it's just amazing stuff to me. And at some point, the hope is that we wake up, because I think the work that you guys do is vitally important, and I think the messaging that we see from the right wing is dangerous. This assault on sanity, this assault on facts. Dangerous stuff. And now, as I said earlier, I understand there are a number of groups that are going to be kicking up some activity around trying to destroy you guys. One of them is this Definers group, and another one is America Rising, which you got to love the name in that. Who are these people?
Well, they're both owned by the same people, Joe Pounder and Mark Rhodes. And I looked at their quote-unquote team on Definers Public Affairs, and there's a number of people from Fox News, which we know is not a credible news source, and there's operatives for the Republican Party there. It's clearly affiliated strongly with the Republican Party, but not just Republican, with the right side of the Republican Party. And
not the correct side, the far extreme right-wing side of it.
Exactly. I'm sorry. I hope that didn't come out the wrong way. But yeah, you're right. The extreme side of the Republican Party. And thank God that we put enough pressure that they canceled the contract. What's scary is that 4 other federal agencies were considering hiring them as well.
Wow. And here's the thing that bothers me about what I see coming. I see this kind of harassment campaign that the propaganda network that you mentioned does so masterfully, and the right wing does so masterfully. I worry that we're going to have scientists and people who are dealing with real serious issues, because whether you believe it or not, the climate is changing. We have very serious environmental problems coming in the near future. My fear is that these groups intimidate those folks into saying, you know what, I don't want to get involved, and maybe even leaving the profession altogether.
I think that's a very real concern. I do believe that a number of people at the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency feel threatened and scared, and it has a chilling effect. What's interesting is that there is one person in the Trump administration that believes that climate change is real, and believe it or not, it's the Secretary of Defense, because Mathis knows that that's one of the crisis points that's going to cause people to migrate from their homeland and cause border issues. But the Trump administration, the EPA, NOAA, any agency that's dealt with climate change at all is being eviscerated.
It's angering. It's frustrating. There's so much to this. John, whatever we can do, please let me know what's going on. Keep us abreast of the attacks that are coming so that we can prepare ourselves.
Thank you so much. We will.
Great talking with you, John O'Grady. And again, as I've been saying, we need to make sure that we are aware of what's coming, because trust me, it is coming. And we must save the EPA one way or another. And I highly suggest you check out their website, savetheepa.org. Lots of good resources there, things to pay attention to. Let's take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1945. That was the day that workers ended their 99-day strike against the Ford Motor Company in Windsor, Ontario. Just across the river from Detroit, workers from the UAW Local 200 fought and won a union shop and dues checkoff. They had to fight hard to get it. The plant was organized during World War II. Workers put off many demands to help with the war effort. After the war, Ford refused to agree to a new contract and laid off 1,500 workers. The workers voiced their rage and issued new demands. They wanted vacation and layoff pay, better grievance procedures, and medical benefits. They also wanted compensation for work on Sundays and holidays. When Ford refused to budge, 14,000 workers took to the picket line and went on strike. By October, they also shut down the powerhouse that brought light, heat, and power to the plant. Management complained machinery would be damaged if the power remained off. The Ontario Provincial Police and the Royal Canadian Mounted Police were called in to reopen the plant. When they arrived, they found a barricade of some 2,000 cars and trucks reinforcing the picket lines. Then, 8,000 workers from Amalgamated Local 195, which included Chrysler workers, walked out in sympathy. They joined the picket lines and stayed out for a month. The Women's Auxiliary organized to feed the strikers. They had financial support from unions, churches, and small businesses from across the country. Returning soldiers marched in solidarity rallies along with much of the community. Because of this strong showing of support, negotiations were jump-started and soon workers were ratifying a new contract. This victory allowed what is now Unifor 584 to win unprecedented gains for its members for more than 3 decades.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
We want the world and we want it now. We're gonna take it anyhow. We want the airwaves. We want the airwaves.
Back to the Rick Smith Show. Website, ricksmithshow.com, according to Bureau of Labor Statistics. And again, you want to know why I'm a supporter of sane regulations? Right here. This is why I am someone who believes we need to have strong regulations and enforcement. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, 2016, we saw almost 5,200 people die on the job. 5,190 folks went to work. They got up in the morning, they brushed their teeth, they got dressed, they had breakfast, they drove to work, and they were killed on the job, and they did not go home. And that is an increase of 7% from the year before. So you're looking at, what? More than 300 more people were killed on the job than the year before. And you go, how is that possible? It's the 3rd year in a row that deaths on the job have increased. And I would argue, you go back to Screwquester, and I was saying this, back then, when the Republicans won the sequester, what they got Obama to agree to was across-the-board cuts. Now, look, he didn't do it wantingly. It was, we're at the edge. And it was a game of chicken. And Obama blinked. And what we've got is across-the-board cuts to things like the Department of Labor, to things like mine safety and health, to OSHA. In fact, right now, according to the AFL-CIO, there are fewer than 800 federal OSHA inspectors. It would now take 159 years for OSHA to inspect every workplace in this country. Given the level of manpower, it would take 159 years to inspect every workplace. And you wonder why injuries are up, deaths are up. You wonder why now we're looking at more than 14 people each and every day who go to work in this country and do not go home. And you wonder why. And understand, here in Pennsylvania, and we talked about this, over the last couple of weeks. Here in Pennsylvania, public sector workers don't have OSHA protections. We talked about the case out in Erie, Pennsylvania of Jake Schwab, who was a bus mechanic for a publicly held bus company. He was killed on the job. Still don't know how or what or anything because there was no investigation done. The police came and said, oh, it was a workplace injury? Well, we're not investigating it. And the insurance company who investigated said, we don't have to tell you. It's an insurance matter. Nobody investigated it. And, you know, there are other states across this country, just like Pennsylvania, where public sector workers don't have the same kind of workplace protections. And understand, fatalities increased among government workers at about 9%. And you look at the fatalities of state and local government workers shot up, just outrageous. And what happens? Well, brush it under the rug. And I've been saying for a very long time, we need to have these protections. Because it could be you. It could be your wife, your husband, your child that goes to work and doesn't come home. And I know. But Rick, they're job-killing regulations. They're onerous regulations. Can't afford them. Cost too much to follow the rules. And you go, what a bunch of bunk. I mean, in this day and age, we still have this. Now, granted, it's not the 100,000 that it was 100 years ago, but we also don't do the same kind of work. And you got to wonder. And all we hear out of this administration is, how do we deregulate? How do we let business do what it does? Well, what it does is it makes profit. That's what its main goal is. More for the business entity, more for the shareholders, more for the CEOs. And you working people, well, you're just tools that can be used and discarded. And another one will come right behind you. And in fact, if we can get you to come, stay a couple of years and leave, so much better. Because then we don't have to worry about you. Move along. Which is why you're seeing this push. And this tax bill does part of what the grand scheme is, which is to make everybody an independent contractor, your own boss, and ultimately you're your own problem. If you can't find work, it's just because you're lazy and shiftless. That's the world we're heading towards. You know, the world that my grandparents built was one of stability and security on the job, decent wages, decent hours, decent conditions. Actual working class power. And what's happened is, over the years, it's been legislated, it's been decided in the courts that, well, you labor people have had too much power. And the ossification of our labor law has caused a once powerful working class to now basically be hanging on for dear life. And honestly, going to take a mortal blow this June when the Supreme Court decides the Janus case. Because that is going to starve unions of basically huge amounts of resources to be able to fight for better wages, hours, and conditions, and safety on the job. And still, yet, under all of these conditions, we know without exception, union workers get hurt less. There are less fatalities because guess what? They've got a voice. They can say, no, I'm not going to do that. When I was driving a truck, every day I went in and I did my pre-trip, looked around, I said, well, no lights. Got to take it over and get the lights fixed. No, the brakes are out of adjustment. Take it over and get the brakes. And there were sometimes something you go, that's just too much. I'm not driving this. And you had the ability to do it. I see drivers who don't have that protection, who drive some of the worst junk in the world. And I say, why do you do that? Well, the boss told me I have to. And they know if they don't, they're going to get fired. Now, of course, it's not going to be for not driving the junk. It'll be for something else. Because Pennsylvania, like most states in this country, is an at-will employment state. They don't need a reason to fire you. And again, I keep coming back to this. Why is it that every working person in this country isn't going, for my sanity, for my security, for my family's security, I absolutely need that card in my wallet. I need that. It's mind-blowing to me. But yet I still hear people complain. They still complain about how horrible conditions are. They still complain about it. But they don't do anything about it. And I ask the question, when do you? Is it if someone gets killed? Is it when you get injured? When is it? Because I'm curious. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'd love to know. I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back, Alex Rawwell is going to be here. I'll give us some more thoughts on this wonderful, terrific tax plan that our Republican friends have hoisted upon us. And, well, we'll find out who the real winners were. Quick break. Right back.
Measures we explore, marching on the Capitol to lobby leaders for involvement. 3,000 people screaming out, "Where's our government?" Lawsuits and arraignments, members under company surveillance. Public divided, either they love us or they hate us. Profit billions off our backs, and it's still not enough. They should have took into account that we never give up. We'll be here one day longer. One day longer. The people's voice is stronger. We work hard for our money, we work hard for respect. Keep fighting for these rights for generations, it's next. One day longer. One day longer. The people's voice
Your
is
working
stronger.
class radio experience, where hard work, common sense, and rational thought are a reality. The Rick Smith Show.
It was not a happy week in Atlanta's airport.
Atlanta airport blackout exposes serious vulnerabilities in nation's transportation systems. Fast-growing winter wildfire in California, now third largest in state history. Study finds climate change already wreaking havoc on our weather. Plus,
The first duty of our government is to serve its citizens.
unless that requires acknowledging climate change, which Trump just removed from the list of national security threats.
All of those not yet removed threats and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
To seize the opportunities of the future, we must first understand the failures of the past.
I'm thinking we must first understand the failures of the present, Mr. President. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, what went wrong at the Atlanta airport?
Well, that is still under investigation, but electricity has been restored to Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport, one of the nation's busiest airports, after that blackout on Sunday trapped travelers on planes and in airport terminals for 11 hours, triggering cascading cancellations of nearly 1,200 flights. Officials say that an electrical fire at an underground Georgia Power electrical facility seems to have knocked out both the airport's main power and its backup electrical system, which was located in the same facility. Atlanta Mayor Kasim Reed on Monday said a full investigation is underway.
There is no evidence to suggest that the fire was caused deliberately. Even so, we're taking this matter extremely seriously and making sure that after this fire event occurred, that the airport is safe and secure.
Seems like having all of the electronics, including the backups, in one place is not very safe or secure.
That's right, and national security experts agree with you. They warn that the airport blackout incident highlights the fragility of the U.S. transportation system, where a single failure at a single airport in a single southeastern city had cascading economic and logistical ripple effects that went across the entire system.
And the entire nation.
In California, the Thomas Fire in coastal Ventura County has now grown to become the third largest wildfire in state history. The massive fire has spread now to Santa Barbara County, prompting new evacuations. More than 8,000 firefighters are battling the blaze that has now been burning for more than 2 weeks, driven by high winds and drought, and that's already destroyed nearly 800 homes. And not just in California. The 2017 wildfire season may go down as the worst on record globally, with unusually high fire levels in many parts of the world, with extensive and severe fires occurring in Chile, the Mediterranean, Russia, the U.S., Canada, and even Greenland. According to scientists at the American Geophysical Union conference this week, this year's total burned area globally is about 3 times the average acreage burned over the last decade.
Wow.
Meanwhile, back in 2015, President Obama called climate change a national security threat in his annual national security strategy.
Climate change constitutes a serious threat to global security, an immediate risk to our national security, And make no mistake, it will impact how our military defends our country.
I missed that guy. By the way, it's already having that impact. Obviously, if you look at all of the storms and all of the fires that we've had in just the past few months.
Indeed. But in a major break with U.S. military leaders, President Donald Trump on Monday removed climate change from that list of threats to the nation in the annual national security strategy.
Because, of course, he did.
Yep. Of course, removing climate change from the list does not magically make it go away. Just last week, Trump signed the National Defense Authorization Act, containing a large section in which current and former U.S. military leaders warn of the threat that climate change poses to national and international security.
So one day he signs a document that says climate change is a grave threat to national security. 2 days later, climate change is not a grave threat to national security.
Exactly.
Not insane at all.
Finally, right on cue, researchers writing in the Bulletin of the American Meteorological Society analyzed 27 extreme weather events that occurred around the world in 2016. They found that human-caused climate change was a significant driver for 21 of them, from extreme heat events to record coral bleaching to extreme rainfall events and flooding disasters. The researchers said the 21 events almost certainly would not have occurred without man-made global warming.
And the insanity continues. For much more on all of those stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Don't forget you can download our reports anytime via Stitcher, TuneIn, or iTunes. Find us, follow us, and share us worldwide on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
The more you ignore me, the closer I get. You're wasting your time.
Right on through. And look, nobody's shocked by this. I guess what is shocking to me is the level of brazenness, the level of we don't really care what our constituents think, because overwhelmingly, everybody I talk to dead set against this tax scheme. They don't see how it's going to help them. In fact, most people I've talked to said, look, it's going to hurt me. It's going to hurt our family. Long term, it's going to cost our economy. It's just insane. Here to talk about this, well, I got to tell you, just angry. Here to talk about this piece of legislation, I've asked Alex Rollo to come talk with us. He is a research associate at the Center for American Progress. Alex, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, thanks for having me back. Good to be here.
So, are we surprised?
I don't think we're too surprised. I think that we saw the writing coming down on this, that the Republicans right now are very dedicated to passing corporate tax cut to help themselves and their donors.
And I don't even know how much it helps them. It's their donors. And I go back to the statement by Representative Collins from New York, who said, and very succinctly and honestly, give him credit, my donors want it. And they tell me if they don't get it, don't come back to me for money. To me, that is really the whole point of this.
Right. It's disappointing to see someone just lay it out. We're bought and sold. Here's what we're pushing for.
So do we get them coats with with labels and stuff? Do we get them NASCAR coats?
Full NASCAR jacket.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if the speaker would like that, put that in the dress code, but it might be worth a shot.
Now, one of the pieces that caught my attention, you had written, that this tax bill is going to be a boom for foreign investors. In fact, what you've said in this is there's a bigger tax cut and a bigger windfall in this for foreign investors than there is for the entire middle class and working class of this country.
So, and actually, it's not quite the entire country. We were looking specifically at the states who voted for President Donald Trump. So if you look at his working and middle class base in those 30 states, but yeah, it's a shocking amount of benefit that goes to foreign investors, because when the bill was at its heart, corporate tax cuts, and especially in the short term, corporate tax cuts they accrue to shareholders. And it's about 35% of U.S. corporate stock is owned by foreign investors. So as such, you're seeing tens of billions of dollars that are going to be going to foreign investors instead of the working class, middle class families that President Trump and Speaker Ryan and Majority Leader McConnell like to talk about.
Now, we were told this was going to be middle-class tax relief. They ran around with the little card saying it's going to be simpler. This is all about the workers. This is all about those left behind. Those are all about the people in Ohio and West Virginia who lost their jobs. This was about them.
Exactly, and we hear that, and the reason they talk about that is because if you actually go to the American people and you say, so corporations, they need to pay more, less, or the same in taxes. I think there was a poll in September, 6 in 10 say they should be paying more. It's people understand instinctively, and like if you look at the data, it shows up that corporate tax receipts as a percent of GDP are lower than they've been in decades in the U.S. Our tax system puts more on workers now and less on corporations. It would be better if we move things in the opposite direction, but instead we're seeing this massive corporate tax cut.
But Alex, we're taxed enough already. The Tea Party told me that from 2010 all the way up until, yesterday, before President Trump, because I can't find him. Have you found a Tea Party person recently?
So I'm in DC, and I don't think we've had like a huge amount of them outside of the Capitol. But yeah, even when I go back home, don't see it. I'm from South Georgia. Don't see a whole lot of Tea Party activity.
What happened? I mean, this is right in their wheelhouse. This is something for them to get all bunched up about.
I mean, it's a very good point. Every time we tried to get something passed during the Obama administration that would help folks. I mean, if it's the American Jobs Act way back when, or if it's just something like funding for Zika, we always heard, we can't pay for it. We have to pay for it somehow. And the crazy thing is, right now we're seeing that we're seeing folks say, look, we need to be passing this $1.5 trillion giveaway. But then when it comes to the Children's Health Program, well, we've got to find some pay-fors. We can't just give kids health insurance without finding somewhere else to cut it. It's really despicable.
Yeah, that would be horrible because, with all of the money that we're giving away, and we're giving a considerable amount of it away, we could fund, and I saw the tweet that went out this afternoon from one of the senators, I think it was Ron Wyden, who said, for $1.5 trillion, we could fund the Children's Health Insurance Program for something like 915 years.
Right. It comes down to priorities, and I think there's our friends on the poverty team, anti-poverty team here at the Center for American Progress, were looking and calculated that you could pretty much end child poverty twice over for the cost of this tax bill. It is a just clear indictment of the priorities here that that the folks in charge right now are saying that things need to go to the upper class.
Now, my favorite quote from #SelloutSusan, since everybody seems to be beating up on Susan Collins, and I would argue rightfully so, she came out and said, look, we need higher wages, we need job growth, we need to give these tax cuts and this tax relief to get those higher wages and those jobs. Alex, come on, we got to help boost to the economy.
And if I actually believe that corporate tax cuts would go down to workers, I might be having a different conversation and a different view on this bill. But I think when you look at the history and when you look at what's happening right now, it's that workers are not able to claw back these corporate tax cuts. And the interesting thing is, I think it was Gary Cohn, the chair of the National Economic Council. He was at a Wall Street Journal thing that the reporter the audience is all CEOs. And one of the Wall Street Journal reporters said, okay, can everybody raise your hand if you're going to be investing in capital and creating jobs and things like that? And you see one or two raise a hand up in the room. And Gary Cohn goes, wait, where are the other hands? And I think that's just what it is. CEOs will tell people, if you look at the earnings calls right now, it's Wells Fargo was especially atrocious. They asked in their Q4 earnings call, well, what are y'all going to do with the tax cuts? They say, well, we're going to increase dividends and we're going to do more share buybacks. It's going to shareholders. It's going to CEOs. It's not going to workers.
Duh, it's going to go in our pockets. And, we've been talking about this forever now. The reality is you give someone a tax break, they're going to put it in their pocket. And you give them a customer to walk through their door, then they're going to spend money on it. It's just common sense. But here again, we keep falling for this time and time again. And look, I think that the CEOs in that room who did raise their hand should be beaten for lying.
Well, I mean, I guess we'll see how it all turns out. Maybe a few will throw some crumbs down workers' ways, but we'll see. I think it was
that hasn't happened.
I think CWA was asking some of the companies they bargained with that supported the tax bill, if they would go ahead and commit off the bat to a $4,000 across-the-board wage increase that the White House was talking about. And I don't think it got any agreements to that MOA.
No, in fact, I had them on the show the other day. They said, nope, not one thing has come back. Not one CEO has said that they're going to share any of it. And look, we know this. We don't need to, you don't need a letter to them. You don't need this. You know instinctively that this kind of a tax bill is going to benefit the few at the expense of the many. And the question is come next November, what kind of a bloodbath are we going to see in the Republican Party?
No, I think that's right. And I think that what we're kind of working here, we are not taking a whole lot of time to be sad about this, but instead getting ready for the next fight, because we're already seeing from Speaker Ryan, I think Senator Rubio mentioned it, that now 2017 was the tax cuts and 2018 is going to be the benefit cuts. And they're talking about, well, now we have to pay for it, and it's going to be paid for on the backs of working people and vulnerable families and the social safety net. We just have to make sure that in this next year, before they go to before they're up for re-election, they don't sneak through cuts that would harm families.
I really hope they do that. I hope I hope on this they actually keep their word, because I stood in line on Election Day 2016 handing out brochures for a friend who was running for state house here in Pennsylvania. And I saw so many senior citizens with walkers and oxygen tanks just, chomping at the bit, ready to vote for Trump and the Republicans. I really do hope that they go after and cut those folks' benefits, because I want to see that anger that they took in 2016 turned on them in 2018. Because, as I was standing in line telling them, this is coming, I hope they remember it was me who told them it was coming.
I mean, well, I hope they don't succeed. I hope we're able to protect those folks even if they voted the wrong way, and maybe they'll learn from the fight.
Yeah, I mean, it's just crazy. Now, is in 2018, is there a way to go? Because a lot of people are asking me, hey, is there a way to undo this? Like, let's say the Democrats are able to take back the House, or the House and the Senate. That'd be great. In 2018, is there a way to undo the damage that they've done, or is this already into place? The estate tax cuts, is that going to be in place? All this stuff already, will it be a done deal?
Well, it will be. It'll be a done deal until we have power in Congress and somebody in the White House that won't veto a change. But Congress can't bind future Congresses. As soon as we get strong progressives in power, we can start righting these wrongs. We can keep there's a few cuts in here to working families. It makes the getting to the child tax credit we want a little bit cheaper relative to this bill, but definitely the corporate cuts and the estate tax cuts and things like that, they can certainly be rolled back.
Yeah, well, good, because at the end of it, to me, just the fact that in a decade, anything that the working class gets will have a sunset provision, and oh, by the way, your taxes are going to go up, but yet the corporate tax cuts are permanent and forever, and yet I know we're told often, Alex, that we have the highest taxes in the world. We don't, and this is only going to make it that much worse.
Exactly. No, it's we're a low tax country when you compare to kind of our peer countries in Europe and elsewhere. And yeah, we're a low tax country, and we're also a country that doesn't look out for the folks in need that need to be looked out for, need help getting back on their feet. And so I think that when people are running in 18, it should be, I think progressives should be focused on righting the wrongs from here and truly standing up for working people, because the problems are real. Like, wage stagnation is real. Issues with people struggling to get by are real. We just have to be pushing solutions that fix it, and not solutions that help CEOs. That's just what it comes down to.
I'm right there with you. And this wish and hope is not working. Sorry. My betting on the benevolence of the handful to take care of the many, it's never worked throughout history. The benevolent dictator has never worked out well. This is a bad idea. It's a bad piece of legislation. It's just, in my view, just bad all the way across.
No, I think that's right. When progressives get back in power, it's not going to be just through fixing things with the tax code. It's making things that make it easier for working people to come together and organize, because we've got to balance the corporate power that push these through. Right now, the donors are there for these type of policies that enrich themselves, and we've got to make sure that working people can stand up and fight back.
Absolutely. What I'm hoping is, I'm hoping whoever the next president is follows Trump's lead, and that everything that Trump does, I hope they undo, not because just Trump did it, but because it's stupid. I mean,
it's awful. And it's not just the tax bill. It's crazy that there are so many things happening right now that the big fight is obviously the $1.5 trillion giveaway, but the Trump NLRB folks are overruling rulings to make it that previously made it easier for workers to come together and like franchises and things like that. You've got the DOL making it easier for restaurateurs to steal the tips of their workers. It's just an ongoing assault, and we've got to stand up and fight on all these issues.
There are no friends in this administration. Alex, I appreciate you taking some time for us. I look forward to talking to you again.
All right, perfect. See ya.
Thanks so much. Again, I look at this, and what's insane to me, just absolutely nuts, is they keep trying to force feed us this is good for you medicine. This is going to help. It's not. Bad all the way across. Quick break. Right back. There are no friends in this administration. Alex, I appreciate you taking some time for us. I look forward to talking to you again.
All right, perfect. See ya.
Thanks so much. Again, I look at this, and what's insane to me, just absolutely nuts, is they keep trying to force feed us this is good for you medicine. This is going to help. It's not. Bad all the way across. Quick break. Right back. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1983. That was the day that a bitter national strike of Greyhound workers came to a close. Nearly 13,000 bus drivers, mechanics, and clerks had gone on strike. They were members of the Amalgamated Transit Union. Contract negotiations had gotten off to a foreboding start that year. The company had demanded deep cuts in both wages and benefits. At the same time, management was set to receive a 10% wage increase. Deregulation in the industry had resulted in a rise of low-fare, non-unionized bus companies. But even with that, Greyhound was still making a profit. ATU members voted overwhelmingly to reject management's proposal. That November, they went out on strike. Greyhound responded by bringing in scab workers to drive the buses. The news media, including Dan Rather at CBS News, reported on the development.
Violence and the threat of violence rode the nation's highways today as Greyhound resumed limited bus service in the midst of a bitter strike. Police listed more than 100 arrests around the country.
In Zanesville, Ohio, bringing in strike breakers led to tragedy. One of these scab drivers plowed his bus through a line of union picketers. One of the strikers, Ray Phillips, was hit and killed. Ray was a steward and former president of his local union. No one was ever held accountable for the killing of Ray Phillips. The strike ended with the workers taking a nearly 8% pay cut. They also lost vacation days and saw a reduction in their benefits. It was another bitter defeat for labor in the same year that saw President Ronald Reagan bust the Air Traffic Controllers Union. From the skies to the roads, American workers were and continue to be under attack. Today's Labor History in 2 brought to you in memory of Carol Hillman, a passionate friend of workers and volunteer of the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
From New York, this is your World in 2 Minutes. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, for Talk Media News. For the second time in 2 months, Saudi Arabia says it's intercepted a missile fired by Iranian-backed rebels in Yemen. The missile reportedly traveled hundreds of miles from Yemen toward the Saudi capital of Riyadh before being destroyed. The U.S. and Saudi Arabia accuse Iran of providing Yemen's Houthi rebels with long-range missile technology, evidence, they say, of Iran's intent to destabilize the Middle East. That U.S. campaign against Iran appears to have a new ally, France. Foreign Minister Jean-Yves Le Drian said on Monday that France is increasingly concerned with Iran's ballistic missile technology and he didn't rule out the possibility of imposing new sanctions on Iran over its behavior. But while the Trump administration may have found another partner willing to publicly condemn Iran, French officials have repeatedly said they wish to keep a 2015 nuclear deal in place, something President Trump has not yet committed to. And speaking of missiles and missile defense, Japan has now agreed to acquire a pair of American-made missile defense systems in an effort to defend against North Korea. Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's government had been eyeing a number of U.S.-made missile defense systems, but settled on Lockheed Martin's Aegis Ashore system because of its cost and wide geographic range. The two onshore missile defense sites are estimated to cost over $1.5 billion, but will reportedly be able to protect all of Japan's mainland. Thanks to a pacifist post-war constitution, Japan's military has long lagged behind its peers in the Asia-Pacific, but that's changed in recent years as Prime Minister Abe allocated more money for national defense and has sought to modify the Japanese constitution to give the country greater ability to assist its allies in the event of conflict. For more global news headlines, visit TalkMediaNews.com.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
To this battle, take my Union gun. Gonna end this world of slavery, for this war is one you're bound to lose. Are you fascists are bound to lose?
Back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. So Jason sent me an email saying, hey, I don't know if you saw this, but the House is going to have to re-vote. Evidently, they have violated the Byrd rule and going to have to re-vote. And look, they're going to re-vote tomorrow, and it'll go through on the same party line vote. The 227, the 203, they're going to vote again. It's going to happen. But again, it's another one of these moments where you look at just how hastily done this whole thing has been and how really, just how much they have not really even cared about procedure. This is about ramming through their ideological piece of garbage and, the heck with the rest of us. And rules be damned. And look, in the Senate, the way it is right now, what they're saying is because of the House vote, you need 60 votes in the Senate, which, trust me, they will fix tomorrow. It will happen. I guess one of the violations involves the use of a 529 plan for homeschooling. And another possible violation, I guess, exempts colleges from a new endowment tax if they have fewer than 500 students paying tuition. And I guess another objection is kind of, I guess, technical, as the bill repeals a section by its number instead of by its title. So there are ways you do things. You got to do things the right way, and they haven't. And not surprising, because look, the rules don't apply to them. So there you go. And look, what I love is, we're going to set up a 529 plan to pay for homeschooling. Because understand, the goal by the DeVosses of the world and all of the homeschool, all of those people, is ultimately to take tax dollars to pay these Christian warriors to homeschool their kids. That's really the goal. The goal is, one, to get the churches into the government coffers, because lots of money for education. But the other part of it is, because you think some school districts, $10,000 a kid. If you got a whole brood of 19 kids, think of how much money that is in homeschooling money. That's the goal. Which is why when you saw all of this, sorry, you can't deduct this, teachers, but oh, by the way, corporations can deduct pencils. And when you saw, sorry, public school, you're screwed because the tax base is going to be hammered, but we're going to give tax breaks for private tuition. It really just shows the direction that Republicans want to take this nation. And it has everything to do with privatizing and profitizing every bit of the commons, taking our country away piece by piece, institution by institution. These people hate America. They hate the American dream that we have built through generations. They hate everything, every institution that built a prosperous middle class. And this tax bill shows that. It's that simple. Love to hear your thoughts. Anything I said got your attention, made you think, made you angry? Love to hear it. Rick at thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for tuning in. If you missed any of today's program, grab the podcast at thericksmithshow.com or get the app on your smartphone. Take the program on the go. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you back here tomorrow.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Together, we can make America better. Email Rick at thericksmithshow.com or interact with us anytime at thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.